Good evening, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for spending your Wednesday with us at Ask the Expert. It is June, and June is Cancer Survivorship Month. And so today we wanted to highlight an expert of a different sort, a life expert. And so today we're going to welcome our guest, Shondia Sabari. Sorry, Shonda. But before I get started, I do want to let you know that there will be an option if you have any questions. Please put them in the Q&A section and they'll pop up and we'll be able to go ahead and answer those questions. I don't believe you'll have the raise hand feature or the ability to put things in the chat, but we will be able to add things in the chat for you. So again, welcome to tonight's show. And we look forward to having a great conversation with Shonda. Good evening, Shonda. How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine. How are you?
I am so amazing. Thank you for asking. So, I wanted to say one, congratulations on being a warrior. And we are so excited to have your conversation here with us to give inspiration to the next generation of warriors or to give inspiration to the caregivers that are assisting warriors along their journey.
Thank
And
you.
so, speaking of a journey, I really would like to know, where did this start for you? What was the start of your breast cancer journey, and how did that shape your life moving forward?
Okay. Can you see me now?
Yes, I can,
You can hear me?
and I can hear you. It's
Uh,
perfect.
Okay, thank you. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer December 2010. I had no symptoms, no lumps, no signs to suggest breast cancer. One day I was getting dressed, getting ready to go to the Dollar Tree, and something said, you need to get a mammogram. I didn't, like I said, I didn't hear any voices, didn't see any shadows. I had an appointment scheduled the next day with my gynecologist. And I told her, I said, you're going to think I'm crazy. I said, something said I need to get a mammogram. And the best way I can describe it is, you know how sometimes when you leave home and you locked your door, but by the time you get to your car, something says, did I lock that door? And you go back and you check. Well, that was that something. And because I believe in God, I believe it was the Holy Spirit. And so I told my gynecologist the next day at my exam. She put me in for a mammogram. The next week, I received a letter in the mail that they saw calcifications and changes in tissue, and that I needed to come back for a diagnostic mammogram. I went back for the diagnostic mammogram, and the radiologist told me that he couldn't look at me and tell me that I don't have breast cancer. He needed to do a biopsy. And so he did the biopsy, and I was diagnosed. I had ductal carcinoma in situ in my right breast. I had stages 0 in my right breast. In my left breast, I had DCIS. I had stages 0 and stage 1A. And also in my right breast, I had an area that was LCIS. Um, the cancer was caught early. I did not have to do chemo and or radiation. I had to take a pill, which is letrozole, Femara, for 5 years.
And so that is one, amazing that you had that intuition and that wherewithal within yourself to say, hey, I'm going to demand something. So one question I have from that, what was it that gave you the courage to talk to your doctor and really request what was going on with you? Did you have were there anything specific that you said, or what kind of advice would you give to somebody who may have a similar feeling that you had when it comes to talking to their doctor?
Well, for one, my doctor and I, we have a really good relationship. And I think that's very important to have a good rapport with all of your medical team. And I'm just so thankful that she and I, to this day, we still have a really good relationship and that she listened to me and I was respectful, when I asked her. Or when I told her, that something said I needed to get a mammogram. And even when she said, you're just 36, we normally don't do mammograms at 36. I didn't become hostile or disrespectful. I just said, well, I'm your favorite patient, do what you got to do so I can get this mammogram. And she says, oh, I'm going to give you one. And so just having a good relationship with your medical team, I don't think it was, anything in particular that I said, just, saying to her that, that something said I needed to get the mammogram. And again, because I believe in God and I know that I have favor over my life, it was just his grace, mercy, and favor that she put me in for the mammogram.
Right. And what I hear a little bit of, you get more bees with honey than vinegar. Having being collaborative and being cooperative in your care really can make a difference. And so moving after that diagnosis and that great relationship that you established, what was the next step for you, and where did the courage come to push forward? Because I know that you took oral medicine. So were there any challenges that you faced, any side effects that altered how it lived in your life? And if so, how did you overcome those things?
No, there were no challenges. I was scared when I heard, the words that, yeah, you have breast cancer. But my grandmother that raised me, she would say to me sometimes, when you're going through things in life, you give yourself 3 days and you got to get up. She said, Jesus wept on the third day, he rose from the grave. So you got to, get up, and not to sound preachy or anything like that, but I can't steer away from my faith and the fact that, favor is what is keeping me and has brought me this far. I did not have to get both breasts removed. It was my decision to get both of my breasts removed because for me, the most important thing was getting the cancer out of me so that I can live and enjoy life with my beautiful children and my fine husband. That was the most important thing for me. I didn't want to go through, reconstruction, and I have, nothing negative to say about anybody who goes through that process. Actually, I admire them. It's just for me, I just wanted the cancer out of me so that I can go ahead and heal and just live and enjoy life. Thankfully, my surgeon, she's phenomenal. She's great. She did a wonderful job with my surgery, with my scars. I didn't have any pain. I didn't have to take any pain medicine. It was my journey with breast cancer. Having had cancer wasn't beautiful, but my journey with breast cancer was beautiful and it was peaceful.
All right, so until she gets back, I'll go ahead and just answer the first question that we have here in the chat. So that way, you can go ahead and discuss a little bit more about your journey. So, in hearing and everything that you're saying, and it sounds like you do have a very good support system. Like with that, were you able to involve your family early on into your early decisions about your breast cancer care?
Absolutely. I discussed it with my children, who were young, 7 and 8 at the time, and also my husband. And my husband told me that he would support me with whatever decision I made, and I'm so thankful for that. And I just had to respectfully let him know that, for me, I wanted to have both breasts removed, and that if he needed breasts to survive, that we had to end the marriage, and I would not ask him for child support or alimony because that would confirm to me that he didn't love me for me, had he said he needed the breast. And it wouldn't be fair for me to hold him hostage in a marriage and he's not happy. So I wanted to know exactly how, he felt. And so he was okay. He was kind of upset because I told him, I was like, you gotta walk, it'll hurt, but I want you to be happy because I love you just that much. So he was happy, and my children, I remember my daughter saying, I said to my kids, I said, if mommy decides to let the doctor remove both breasts, would you all be upset and embarrassed when I go to school with you guys and to events and to functions, and all the other kids' mommies had breasts and I didn't, and so my son said, Mommy, all we care about is you living. And my daughter, she said, I wish somebody would pick at you, Mommy, and I would kick them in the face. So I knew then, after talking to my kids and my husband, that we were all on one accord, and that the most important thing for them, like it was for me, is for me to live. So yes, they were very involved. They asked questions. They went with me to my appointments. We laughed together. You know, I didn't cry a lot. You know, but they had their moments, and so we just hugged and embraced each other. And again, like I said, it was a peaceful journey.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. And it seemed as though like, your support system sounds very incredible. So with so for we have like another question here in the chat. So with what extra support did you have like for your children who were so young at the time of your diagnosis? I know, for the support system for yourself, but what was that family support, in order for, while you were taking care of yourself, who was the person to step up, or if you had, a village behind you as well?
My husband, it was my husband. And I did have, relatives and friends and my kids' teachers, the principal, our neighbors, church members, so many people were so supportive. But, for my kids, they primarily just they would talk with me, talk with their dad, my husband. He was, their support. He is indeed the head of the house and the man of the house, and he took care of the house and he took care of our babies, and I'm forever thankful for him for that.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. And hearing all of this, it seems like very, empowering, especially for those when it comes when it comes with like a survivorship. So so with my next follow-up question, like with that, so how were they like, with your journey of recovery, not only with your family, but also with your spouse, you mentioned your faith, your church as well. What was that like?
It was fun. I was spoiled a lot. And so something I did the I planned the day before my surgery. And then I'll go back to what you just asked me. So the day before my surgery, I made arrangements for while I was in surgery, um, 45 minutes after my surgery started. I made arrangements for a delivery to be made to the hospital in the waiting room for my husband and my kids. I had flowers delivered and a teddy bear for my daughter. I had balloons for my husband and my son. Um, and so my husband, he was like, he couldn't figure out what in the world. He was like, now I know she's back there in surgery, but we're getting this delivery and it said it's from her. And so because I didn't know how things were going to go. And I just wanted them to know that even though I didn't know what was going on because I was, sleep in surgery, I
Mhm.
wanted them to know that, regardless of how things went, that I love them and that I appreciate them. And so, because of that, I think that we were the connection that we even had before that. I think that, the support that they got from me and that they got from our church members, and from each other, that's what helped them cope. That's what helped me get through, everything because we talked about everything. We weren't embarrassed about, me not having any breasts. Um, my doctor, she was amazing. She checked on me. We stayed in touch. She texted me, I text her. And that helped out a whole lot.
That's amazing. That's very powerful. And, it does give an insight, what it means. Like when you're going through a journey like that, it's not something that, it's not for the faint of heart, but it is very needed to have like a support system like that. So one of the other questions I have is, kind of pivoting a little bit. Did you experience like any financial challenges or anything like that, or was insurance ever an issue when it comes to your journey of survivorship after the fact, after your surgery, the diagnosis, and the treatment?
Thankfully, I didn't. Well, I received a letter about 2 weeks after my surgery from the insurance company that my mammogram wasn't covered. And so I laughed because I'm like, now they're sending me this letter and my breasts are floating somewhere in a river and they talking about a mammogram. And so I called the insurance company and I told them, I said, well, I got this letter and you all said the mammogram wasn't covered. but I don't have any breasts. So I had cancer. And so the lady actually cried that I spoke with, and she said, wow, for you to, reveal all of this. She said, we'll make the adjustments and disregard the letter. So thankfully, I didn't have any issues.
You're muted, German. Mhm. No, still muted.
I'm so sorry. My
That's
apologies.
okay. That's okay.
My apologies. You didn't hear the follow-up question like to it, but with that being said, I'll let Jalecia take over from here. It was great speaking with you, Shondia, and
Thank you. Thank you so much.
thank you for bearing with us, everybody. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate it. My apologies for the technical difficulties. But thank you, Germinal, so much for jumping in there. Teamwork. You got to love a great team. And it sounds like you had a great team with you, Shonda, with your family, and being able to get through your diagnosis and the double mastectomy and processing that. And so through that experience, how did that shape your move into advocating for women with breast cancer, or women who don't have it and are not getting mammograms? How did that evolve and change the direction of your life?
So after my journey, I realized that, it was more like a dream, not a nightmare. It was like I went to sleep and I woke up and, it was just like, wow, like I had breast cancer. Like that wasn't that bad. And then so, I knew in my heart that I had to be a blessing to others and that I had to help others get through their journey. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. I remember my aunt came from Boston and she told me, she said, you need to get in a support group. And I said, no, I don't need to get in a support group because if those ladies start crying, it's going to hurt me because, it's going to hurt me to see them cry and, and I'm not going to be able to do anything for them. And she said, no, but because of your positive attitude, you need to be there. You need to be their support. And when she said that, it hit me. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I do. And so I started making phone calls. I started texting and emailing people that I, know and don't know, and just saying, look, I had breast cancer, it wasn't that bad, let me tell you what happened. And when I after speaking at support groups, other breast cancer awareness events, and when I realized that people listened and people were inspired, then I realized that, you know what, this is my purpose. The first 36 years I did it my way. The rest of my life is on the path that God has planned for me, the path that I didn't know that I would be on. And I so love it.
That is an amazing perspective, because perspective definitely changes the direction of your healing and the direction of how you the difference between becoming a warrior and becoming succumbing to your circumstances, and it plays a huge part in that. And so what advice would you give a young mom who may have received this diagnosis? I see that you navigated parenthood as well as a marriage, and so what would be your advice? This is a question from the audience, by the way.
Okay. My advice would be to talk with, you said a young mom, right?
Yes.
To sit down and be honest, with your children. Let them cry if they need to cry. If you can't answer whatever, give them the opportunity to ask you questions. If you can't answer the questions, then you take them with you to get those answers. If it's with the nurse navigator or to your appointments, but you get those answers and make sure those answers are clear where they can comprehend and understand what those responses are. If you believe in prayer, you pray with your children, and just let them know that if they're asleep at night and they wake up with questions, no matter what time of day or night it is, they can always come to you.
It sounds like you've done this before. So do you have conversations with community members often? Like how it sounds like you're real familiar with navigating these waters of talking to a young mom or somebody in a situation.
I do. I do it daily. And I I look forward each day to wake up and to thank God for blessing me and my husband and my children to live to see the day. And then the next thing is, God, please bless me to help or to inspire at least one person. And so every day, it is my mission to touch at least one person's life. So many people are dealing with so many different things,
Mhm.
not just cancer. And
Right.
so I just feel like, if I can tell them something just to make them smile, even if it's just for a second, I feel like I've done my part. And, if I don't do anything else or accomplish anything else in this world, as far as, projects, it could be something like, as simple as this garden I'm starting, you know, I want to always be able to accomplish being a blessing to others and pouring into them and giving them encouragement.
And so, do you actively do that in any of your advocacy work? Like, in what ways do you pour in to other women? What ways can they find support from you?
So, as far as emotional support, a lot of women reach out to me. It's through word of mouth or social media, or they've heard me, or, interviews, or like we're doing the Zoom now, or speaking engagements. But they reach out to me, and then, I talk to them, answer whatever questions they have. And then sometimes, I go to appointments with ladies, sometimes, and men too. And then sometimes when they're unemployed due to their diagnosis or to their treatment, through my small nonprofit organization. When we're able to, we help, buy groceries, pay electric bills, help with transportation to and from their appointments. And so just being present to let them know that, we can't solve, or I or we can't solve all of their problems, but we can do something to help and to decrease the stress some.
That that is magical. It reminds me of a space that I occupy sometimes, being a doula. And it sounds like you're like a doula, a helpmate, for people navigating this experience in life. And that is so helpful, especially as we are trying to figure out ways as a community to help support others in the community. So what advice or what do you wish you had, support wise or access to, during your diagnosis that can probably be done now that the community can pour into? What do you wish was around, for resource purposes?
To be honest, and it's not being arrogant or cocky or anything, it's just telling you the truth. I honestly had everything that I needed, even when there were people in my life that were related to me, or people who I thought were my friends, that I thought should have been there with me and been there for me, who weren't. Even when I thought I needed them there then, I later realized after my journey that God didn't want them there. And then I became okay with it. Like, it didn't hurt anymore that they weren't there. But I'm just so thankful that I had everything and everybody that I needed. Everything was just orchestrated the way that it was supposed to be. Everything, every part of my journey was all a part of God's plan. And for that, I'm so thankful.
That's amazing to hear that, you were able to have such a great support system. Were there any community partners that played a part in that support system, outside of, like, not the doctors or your direct family, but any community partners that played a role?
The American Cancer Society, they were, my husband's go-to and my children's go-to. Um, my children go to as well. And the second part of the question I didn't answer when you said, as far as like resources, like if other women who are going through what they need, I would highly recommend, they have a 24-hour customer support line yeah, support line where you can call if you have questions. And so my husband, excuse me, he did that. And I did it a few times. And so they played a huge role in our journey. So I'm very thankful for them and
And
all
that's
that they do.
That's a great resource. I don't think that I would have thought to call the American Cancer Society for, just questions, and it makes sense. And so, speaking of being able to ask questions, let's jump into the chat. One question was, they asked, "What is DCIS, and is that different from a traditional cancer diagnosis?"
So when I was diagnosed, I remember the nurse saying, well, if you're going to have breast cancer, this is the type of cancer you want to have. And I'm like, well, who in the hell wants to have cancer anyway?
True.
I didn't, I didn't know then what I know now. So DCIS is ductal carcinoma in situ. So it's an early stage breast cancer that I had. And again, I'm just so thankful. Early detection is so important. I'm so thankful for the grade of breast cancer, the type, the stage that I had, because again, it was all, caught early. And because of the type and the grade and the stage that I had, and because of my Oncotype DX score, which is a score you get when you're given an Oncotype DX test, because of the type of breast cancer that I had, you get a score between 0 and 100. If your score is a 30 or higher, then the chances of a recurrence is high. My score was a 7. And again, going back to the Bible, 7 means completion. I look at it as completion and perfection. So that's, when I say everything was just lined up the way that it was supposed to be, I didn't understand it when I got the diagnosis, but it all just added up, that it was victory was truly at the end of the road.
I think what makes the story even more amazing is that, you were not of screening age. I think that is to highlight that it is recommended that screening age begins at age 40. And when this happened, you weren't 40 yet, correct?
No, I
Yeah.
wasn't.
So even if keeping up with, your screening tests and all of that, you weren't even of the age. So to have that wherewithal, so of being able to say, hey, I want this anyway. And so what do you say to people who are now diagnosed? How do you get them to have the conversation with their families? Because we know that while breast cancer, any of the cancers at this point may be genetic, but may not be a part of have a genetic cause, but there is some familial connections to cancer. And I think a lot of times in our community, we tend to keep it to ourselves. You don't really know about, somebody's cancer until it's too late. So what do you say to people about having that family conversation?
And and you're right, it can be difficult because you have people that don't communicate with some people, in their families, and it's hard, there's family feud, family dramas, and we all have it. But when it comes to something like that, then that's when I think it's not that I think, I know that it's very important that you put all of that aside. And even if you need to tell somebody that you don't talk to, tell somebody else that talks to that person that you were diagnosed with cancer, so that that person can tell the person that you don't talk to in the family, because everybody needs to stay on top of their health. How can they truthfully tell their doctors when the doctors say, do you have a family history of breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer, if they don't know the family's history? And the best way I can also, help with this is I look at it like this. If uh, if I was diagnosed with breast cancer, if someone else in my family was diagnosed with breast cancer and I kept that a secret, it's almost like I'm a murderer. Like if something
You're
was to happen to
assisting in
them
that
and I
that
didn't
that
tell
downtime.
and I didn't tell them that, I had cancer. So look at it like that. If you know you got something and somebody else in your family gets the same cancer,
Yeah,
and then unfortunately, things may not go well for them like they went for you. If something happened to them, you consider it your
it's
fault.
kind of
But you
on your
should have told
fault.
them. You should have told your family that you have a history, because by
Mm,
you telling them, they can go and get checked. They can get the
make
genetics test. And it's
they
not
can
being
make better
mean. I'm just
decisions.
being truthful.
And that is true. Now, did you, prior to your diagnosis, did you know if you had a family history of breast cancer?
Well, I didn't know for sure on the maternal side. I had found out on my dad's side, that my grandmother had breast cancer, but I didn't know also that I think it's 5 of her 7 sisters also were diagnosed with breast cancer.
Was
But
this
then I also
before or after your diagnosis?
after.
Mm,
And then also, I found out since then that there were some other people that were diagnosed in the family that they kept secrets, they just didn't want to talk about it. And I didn't get upset. I was disappointed. And the reason why I couldn't get upset is because God allowed me to go through it so that I can get the knowledge that I have so that I know what I need to have, what discussion I need to have with my medical team
mhm,
and how I can better help, my family, friends, you know, other people in my life, church members, neighbors. So
mhm.
I'm just thankful for the experience. See, sometimes in life when things don't go the way we plan for them to go and we experience things, sometimes it's not always about us. Sometimes we experience those things so that we can help other people with
Others.
our experiences.
And I think that I love that point so much. And I think that's also why it's important for us to have conversations like this, because it lets people know that it's real, it's out there. We need to have more of the conversation. And maybe you might have touched somebody to have a conversation with their family. Maybe they don't have it, but they're curious. We can ask the conversations. Because I think that having that conversation starter is important. As much as we can talk about other things, we can always bring it back to our health. And so I love that point. I have a question in the chat and says, what improvements or changes, if any, as an advocate, would you like to see in survivorship for cancer patients?
So I'd like for cancer patients to be encouraged more from their medical team to get involved. And when I say get involved, go to cancer conferences so that you can learn more about the type of cancer you were diagnosed with and other cancers. Um, Go to their workshops, their seminars, their cancer conferences, national cancer conferences that are state on the state level, but get involved, volunteer with the American Cancer Society. But I just feel like it's so important to get involved or go volunteer at a support group, volunteer at your cancer center, if you're a cancer patient, so that you can know and do clinical trials. If you're able to participate in a clinical trial, do that, but being involved so that you can be your own advocate, so that you can also not just advocate for yourself, but advocate for others. And that's
Mm,
why I love, um, you know, going to cancer conferences so that I not only know this stuff for myself, because I want to help others. There's so many people who may not be able to go like I'm able to go. So I want to be, I want to be that person that they can come to, just like we're doing this Zoom tonight,
yes.
so that I can answer the questions the way that I need to answer the questions and hopefully help somebody else.
That's a great way to wrap. I even had a question kind of similar to this. It was like, how can communities better educate themselves about breast cancer? And that's a very valid point. I think a lot of people think, oh, let me go and Google some things or let me read an article. However, attending the well thought out events that are surrounding cancer and the education and the advancements in cancer are very, very helpful. And that is a great tip of things that we can do to, educate ourselves. Because sometimes a lot of these things are either free or we can rewatch them online if we can't attend in person. That's a great point. And so what role on a little larger level can the community play, can community organizations play in either supporting or helping educate about breast cancer awareness?
Doing more virtual Zooms, webinars, because like you said, everybody may not have the resources to go, to a conference, to fly to a conference or drive to a conference, not necessarily because of their finances, but their health. Maybe their health won't, allow them to be able to go to those places or to go to those conferences. So I just think that, having more informational sessions, more Zooms so that people can know, Q&As. I think I love Q&As because people have questions. A lot of times you go to conferences and workshops and you got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people talking, but then you have a little time for Q&A. So I think another thing that they can do is instead of having these Zooms where everybody's just talking, just have a Q&A Zoom. A breast cancer Q&A, a prostate cancer Q&A Zoom, or just a cancer in general Zoom, or conference or workshop or whatever, so people can ask their questions and get them answered.
And what do you say about the people that may have been maybe a little shy to ask their questions? What are some ways that they could seek out their answers and still be in their comfort zone a little bit?
Find a friend that's brave and bold and say, okay, they got this Zoom going on. I'm not going to ask no questions, but I'm going to text you when we're on the Zoom and you ask the question. I'm not going to do it. It's ways around it.
Yeah, having a good support group, that is a great way. It's a good point. I think we all have that one friend that's opposite of us. So that's a great point. Lean on your support system. So I have another question in the chat. It says, have you done any advocacy work on grants? Oftentimes, cancer survivors are needed in research work to gain better perspectives.
I have not yet. There's
Yet.
so
Emphasis on the yet.
there are so many opportunities, so many things to be done. My focus has been so much on the patients that I haven't, done a lot of things that I can do, and probably should do, because my focus, like I said, has basically been, on the patients and just trying to get, people who have been recently diagnosed, or recently survived cancer, just trying to get them through. I have so many emails, so many text messages, so many phone calls to return. It's like there are never enough hours in the day because, I may only talk to 2 people or 3 people a day, but sometimes those conversations can last 1 to 2 hours each.
Yes.
So that's where my focus lies.
And so I think that that's great work that, you understand. And I'm still going back to that yet, because that yet is a great point. This is a great foundation, but your perspective and your positive energy would be wonderful on a large platform. So I look forward to the yet to come. And so when it comes to your hopes and what would you like to see moving forward in cancer research, breast cancer research specifically, and treatment? What are your aspirations of just what could be for potential breast cancer patients?
I don't want there to be an age limit. Like, I don't want I don't want a person to have to be 35 or 45 before they get a mammogram or before they get a colonoscopy. I just don't think there should be any limits, because everybody's situation is different. What if there's a family history? What if they don't have symptoms like I didn't have symptoms? I just think that those limits, those age limits should go away. And I just hope and pray that one day they will, because some people, they don't want to go because, they'll say, well, they're not going to do it or insurance is not going to cover it because I'm not that age. And
Yeah.
they said I can't do it,
That definitely can be a challenge. I think that we have been doing some work on making sure that the age does get lowered, because it was 45, and now it is 40. Challenge that we have, and we have to find a different way to do these kinds of screenings, I guess. But the challenge becomes, the younger we are, the more dense our breasts are, the harder it is to see cancer on the mammogram, on the x-ray. You can't really see it because they blend in. And that is my non-medical approach to the answering that. But
well, that's why they have the CEM mammograms.
Yeah, I wish that
those
there
can
was
see
better
better.
ways for us to address younger women, because we're seeing breast cancer happen younger and younger, before 40. And you're right, there needs to be something to kind of help women that are kind of in that outlier part of breast cancer diagnosis.
You're absolutely right. And for women who have the dense breasts, that's why they have the CEM, contrast enhanced mammogram. So those are better than the regular 3D mammograms, as far as women with dense breasts.
Mhm.
So that's something that, people can look into if they've been told that they've had dense breasts, is requesting a contrast enhanced mammogram.
That's a good question to make sure that we bring up, because we need options. And I think I really agree with you that we need to have some type of options because it's happening too much.
Mhm.
And that if we can catch it early, you don't want somebody to have symptoms or have no symptoms at 35 and have to wait 5 years before they can technically get screened. And had you not had that voice speak to you, who knows when you would have gone to the doctor, and got screened. And so, how can people continue to support breast cancer survivors and advocates like yourself? Where can our support be?
I think that if there's somebody, can you hear me? Because it just said my connection is unstable. Can you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you now. Yes.
Okay. If there's somebody in your life that's been diagnosed with cancer, um, you know, find out from them if they're okay with you going with them to an appointment or, talking with their nurse navigator, or again, going to their medical appointments, or either going to a support group, but just interacting with them to find out what their needs are. Just being there for them is very important. And I think that, that helps in more ways than people realize.
No, I think that's amazing advice because I think sometimes we try to do too much when we want to help people to
Mhm.
show that we're available. And it's really the simple things that go a long way.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions in the chat.
Mhm.
One is, do you find that there is good community support to assist with cancer patient needs, like transportation to appointments, meals, childcare, etc.?
I don't think there's enough, but there's some. There could be more, especially with the amount of people who are being diagnosed now. So, no, there's not enough. There is some, but I think there could be more.
There'll be more.
There should be more too.
I have another question, but I do have a comment that lets us know about a new recommendation from the American College of Radiology. They now encourage women at the age of 25 to have a risk assessment with a breast specialist, especially for Black women and Ashkenazi Jewish women, to better develop a personalized screening plan. This is one way to address the younger age breast cancer that we are seeing. That is amazing that, hey, we talked it up and now it's happening.
Mhm. And whoever shared that, thank you so much for
Yes,
sharing
thank
that
you for
because you don't
sharing
know
that.
who else on the call needs that information. So thank you. And thank you for
That
sharing it with me.
that is amazing. I'm going to put this in the chat for everybody to be able to see, and because that is awesome. Thank you for that advice. And then the other question that I have in here, it says, what advice would you give to our loved ones who are our only caregivers for cancer patients in recovery or in survivorship?
So I would encourage them to get therapy. Therapy is always good. Um, and to also, find something that they like to do and maybe just take a break and do it. It could be something as simple as taking a walk, going for those who drink coffee or tea, but just taking a break for yourselves because sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially to see people you love go through something that is going to change their lives forever.
That's great advice to talk about going to therapy. I mean, everybody should talk to a therapist if you have the opportunity. But seeking that time for yourself, I think you're right. It's very important to kind of remember that the caregiver is an individual, And I think like the gift that you offered your family when you were going into surgery, just kind of reminding people that you're appreciative of the things that they do and the time that they put forward. I think that is definitely a great way to look at it in approaching our caregivers. Are there any last like pieces of advice or trinkets, something that you want us to remember and take home with us in our back pocket before we wrap up for this evening?
If there's someone on this Zoom, if that knows that something's not right, don't wait. Go get yourself checked. If you know and don't know if there's a family history, have a conversation, with your doctors and just say, you know what, tell them what you know, and then say, tell them that there are things that I don't know, and do that risk assessment. Like, I think that is so important. Like, have that risk assessment. Like, I think that is just so important, because early detection is very important.
Yeah.
I remember the radiologist saying that the cancer was in me for at least 1 to 2 years, and I had
Wow.
no symptoms.
That to think about that is just, it's alarming because you're taught to look for symptoms. So to
Mhm.
hear that you were living life normally and it really was just in a moment of God to say, hey,
Mhm.
go ask for this. And that is such an inspiring story, but also an alarming and eye-opening story that, hey, we need to pay more attention to our bodies and listen to that voice inside of us. I have dropped the link in the chat for that guideline from the American College of Radiology. So that everybody can have it for their reference. Please grab it, pin it to your toolbar, send it to everybody that you know. Because I think the big take home, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think the big take home that I'm hearing from you, Shonda, is that we need to make sure we're having conversations with our family.
Absolutely. And also, I want to take this time to thank you all for having this Zoom, because, we may never know the people on here that we've helped, and then how they can share the information to help others. To the people that I've shared the link with that, join the Zoom, thank you so much for your support. I know my husband is on here. He's not here where I am now, but I know he's on here. I love you, baby.
Yes, shout out the husband. We love to hear it. I also want to thank everybody for hanging in there with us while we had our technical difficulties. Thank you so much to Germinal for hopping in there and continuing the conversation. We are so excited. I do have one thing in the chat. They want to know, do you have any information about your nonprofit that we can
Yes.
put in the chat?
So my website address is boldandbreastless.com. And then also, if you would like to follow me on social media, on Instagram, Bold and Breastless, and on Facebook, Bold and Breastless. And if you'd like to reach out to me, if there was a question or questions that you have that weren't comfortable asking in the chat, boldandbreastless@gmail.com. You can email me, and I will do my best to answer you tonight. If I don't answer you tonight, I will answer you this week. But again, bold and breastless at gmail.com, and then boldandbreastless.com is my website address.
I dropped that in the chat for everybody as well. And then one last thing before we wrap up, we have a special shout out. Hey, Mom from Trinity.
Oh, baby girl, I love you, baby. I love you so much.
Oh, that's so sweet. You guys are going to make me tear up. So, but thank you so much, Shonda, for sharing your story of hope
Okay.
and strength in survivorship,
Mhm.
because I think sometimes we don't realize that there is life on the other side of diagnosis and there is strength in the journey. So we appreciate you sharing your strength
Thank you.
and your journey with us, and
Thank you.
continue to be a light to the rest of the world, because girl, we need you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. We will send out the recording later on this week.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night, everybody.
Good night.